Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going to be looking at something today that could have a really big impact on a lot of people's lives. It's a lawsuit, and this one targets a law called Section 504. And this law protects people with disabilities from discrimination.
Right.
So think of this deep dive as your shortcut
Yeah,
to understanding just what's going on and why it matters to you.
definitely.
Our source material today is an action alert and explainer
Okay.
from the Disability Rights, Education, and Defense Fund.
Okay.
They're also known as the DREDF.
Gotcha.
And get this, the lawsuit isn't about, just changing a few things in Section 504.
Right.
It's aiming to just get rid of the entire law.
The whole thing, yeah.
That's right.
Before we get into the specifics, though, I think it might be helpful to unpack what a lawsuit even is.
Yeah.
And how it works, particularly in this context.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have this, Hollywood image of lawyers shouting objections in a courtroom. But
Right.
what's the reality here?
Well, a lawsuit is basically a legal process where someone's asking the court to settle a disagreement.
Okay.
In this case, we've got 17 states going up against the entire federal government.
Wow.
Pretty high stakes.
Okay, so we've got this legal battle brewing, 17 states wanting to just scrap Section 504.
Yeah.
What exactly is Section 504? Can you give us the rundown?
Certainly, Section 504 is a law. It was passed back in 1977,
Okay.
and it says that any organization that's getting federal funds cannot discriminate against people with disabilities.
So that means schools,
Yeah,
hospitals, any organization that gets money from the federal government has to follow these rules.
exactly.
That's a lot of places.
A lot of places.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that Section 504 has been strengthened over the years.
Why?
Most recently, there were some updates in 2024
What?
that disability rights advocates really pushed for.
Our source from the DREDF gives some really great examples of what this law actually does in practice.
Yeah.
Things like making sure that there are sign language interpreters available,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that websites are accessible
Mm-hmm.
for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that medical equipment can be used by people with disabilities.
Right.
It's amazing to see how much impact it has.
It's really amazing. Those are just a few examples.
Yeah.
And they illustrate how Section 504 helps ensure that people with disabilities can fully participate in society.
Which makes the potential consequences of this lawsuit even more worrying,
Yeah.
right? If these 17 states get their way,
Mm-hmm.
people with disabilities could lose access to a lot of essential services and support.
Yeah, that's a key point. And it's not like these states just want to tweak the law a little bit or, make a few changes.
Right.
They're aiming to, completely dismantle it,
Wow.
even if they only have issues with specific parts.
It seems kind of extreme, like
Yeah.
using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Yeah, it's definitely a radical move with potentially huge consequences.
So what's next in this legal saga?
Mm.
The source mentions a February 25th deadline. What does that mean?
So that's the date when both the states and the federal government have to submit their official arguments to the court.
Okay.
They'll be laying out, their positions and what they want to achieve.
Gotcha.
It's possible that other states who support Section 504 might jump in and file their own arguments, in favor of the law, too.
So things are about to get even more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of getting involved,
Yes.
I noticed our source mentioned something called amicus briefs.
Yeah.
What are those all about?
So amicus briefs are documents that are submitted to the court by people or organizations who aren't directly involved in the lawsuit,
Okay.
but who want to provide their expert opinions or insights.
So it's kind of like getting expert testimony from someone who's not on either legal team.
Exactly. Think of it like that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And in a case with such far-reaching consequences, these outside perspectives can really help the court understand, the complexity of all the issues. It's interesting to consider, why these 17 states are so determined to challenge this law. What's their beef,
Right.
Their main argument seems to be that the law, especially with the recent updates, goes beyond what the federal government should be able to control.
So they're saying it's kind of like stepping on states' rights.
Exactly. It's an overreach of federal power.
Okay.
They're saying that the Constitution doesn't specifically give the feds the power to, regulate things like disability discrimination in healthcare or social services.
Mm.
They believe that, these issues should be left up to each individual state.
But wait, doesn't the Constitution also guarantee equal protection under the law?
Right.
So how do they square that with this whole argument against Section 504?
Yeah, well, that's the crux of the legal debate.
Okay.
The states argue that while the Constitution prohibits discrimination,
Huh.
it doesn't lay out exactly how that should be applied or enforced.
Okay.
So it's open to interpretation.
So it's this battle over, how to interpret these big constitutional principles
Right.
and apply them to these specific situations.
Exactly.
Like disability rights?
Exactly. And this tension between federal and state authority is like a recurring theme throughout American history.
Absolutely.
It pops up in debates about civil rights, environmental regulations, all sorts of big policy areas.
It's fascinating how this case connects to these larger historical and political trends.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that these legal battles aren't just about specific laws.
Yeah.
They're often kind of reflections of these deeper ideological clashes.
Absolutely. And in this case, the outcome could have a significant impact on how, federal power is wielded in other areas.
Right.
So it could set a precedent for future challenges to federal regulations.
Yeah. It's a lot to take in, but it really highlights why it's so important to stay informed and engaged in these legal processes.
Right.
Especially when the stakes are so high.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So speaking of engagement, let's go back to what individuals can do to make their voices heard.
Yeah.
We mentioned writing to your state attorney general. What are some other ways people can get involved?
Well, the DREDF's Action Alert really emphasizes the power of collective action.
Okay.
They suggest things like connecting with local disability rights organizations, participating in rallies or protests, and spreading awareness on social media.
Those are all excellent suggestions. And, it's important to remember that even small actions can contribute to a larger movement.
Definitely.
Sharing information, talking to your friends and family, educating yourself on the issues.
Yep.
All valuable forms of engagement.
All valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we all have a role to play in advocating for a more just and equitable society.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that other states might choose to file their own arguments supporting Section 504.
Right.
What's the significance of that?
Well, it really highlights the fact that this isn't a simple, fight between 17 states and the federal government.
Okay.
Other states recognizing the importance of Section 504 might step in to defend the law, essentially joining the legal battle on the side of the federal government.
So it could become like a multi-sided legal battle.
Exactly.
With different states kind of choosing sides on the issue.
Exactly. And the involvement of these additional states could really influence the court's decision.
Wow.
Demonstrating how much support there is for Section 504 and all of its protections.
So it's like a legal tug-of-war.
Yeah.
With the fate of disability rights hanging in the balance.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
As the case unfolds, it'll be fascinating to see how all these different players, from individual citizens to state governments, how they engage in this high-stakes legal and political struggle.
This has been incredibly insightful. Now, before we move on to the potential impact of all this, let's take a moment to kind of reflect on what we've learned so far. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the ins and outs of lawsuits to, the potential fallout if Section 504 is overturned. But I think it's really important to kind of bring it back to the human element here. What would the real-world impact be if this law were to just disappear?
The consequences would be significant and, frankly, devastating for millions of people with disabilities.
Right.
Imagine a student with a learning disability being denied the accommodations they need to succeed in school.
Right.
Or someone in a wheelchair being unable to access essential healthcare services.
Wow.
These are the real-life scenarios that we could be facing.
It's hard to even think about those scenarios.
Yeah.
We've come so far in terms of recognizing and protecting the rights of people with disabilities.
Right.
And it feels like this lawsuit is a threat to all that progress.
Yeah, you're right. Section 504 has been instrumental in creating a more inclusive and accessible society. And without its protections, we risk going backward.
Wow.
And people with disabilities would face immense barriers in almost every aspect of their lives.
And it's not just about individual struggles.
Right.
It's about our values as a society, right?
Protecting the rights of all citizens, regardless of their abilities, is fundamental to a just and equitable world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This case goes beyond legal technicalities. It's about who we are as a nation and what we believe in.
Right.
Do we value equal opportunity and inclusion for all?
Right.
Or are we willing to reverse decades of progress?
That's a powerful question, and I think it's one we all need to really consider.
Yeah.
This isn't just an abstract legal debate.
Right.
It has real-world implications for real people.
Exactly. The outcome of this case will have a tangible impact on countless individuals and families.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to make a difference?
Well, it's crucial for people to stay informed and engaged, and this can take many forms, from writing to your elected officials,
Sure.
supporting disability rights organizations, to simply having conversations about these issues with friends and family.
Right.
Every action, big or small,
Yeah.
can contribute to the fight for disability rights. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and inclusive future.
Couldn't agree more. The power of collective action shouldn't be underestimated.
Right.
By working together, we can advocate for a society that values inclusion, justice, and equal opportunity for all.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive into the complexities of this Texas v. Becerra lawsuit.
Yeah.
We hope you've gained a better understanding of what's at stake, the potential consequences, and most importantly, how you can get involved and make your voice heard.
Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
And the more informed we are, the better equipped we are to advocate for ourselves, our communities, and the values we hold dear.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of exploration. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better world. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.